everybody out there in interwebs land, wherever you may be on this great green globe of ours that we call Earth. Welcome, welcome, welcome to you. I hope you're having a great day, a great night, a great morning, evening, afternoon, wherever the heck you are. I hope you're having a good time. I hope you're well, and I hope you're having fun. My name is Garland Thompson. I am the host of Behind the Screen, Cool Conversations with Cool People, and I am so thrilled to be here. This is the fifth conversation in our series here, and we are going to have a good time today. I'm the CEO and founder of Zoomcatchers. This show is indeed powered by Zoomcatchers. We are a virtual event planning company, and we were established last year during the pandemic. Crazy time to start a business, I know, but we did it in order to help people have, first off, better Zoom communications, but just better communications in general. And that's another reason why we're doing this series, Behind the Screen, Cool Conversations with Cool People, because we wanted to give folks a chance to be heard out there. Cool Conversations basically is where everything cool comes from. Everything that has happened that has ever been considered cool in any way, shape, or form in the history of humanity has come from a cool conversation. Somebody started talking about it with somebody else, and then that somebody went, hey, and they had an idea, they got inspired, and from that idea came some action, and next thing you know, civilization is rolling along. So, never doubt the power of a conversation here, folks. So that's what we're here to do. Have a cool conversation with a cool person. Today's cool conversationalist is a good man. He's a Burqueño from Albuquerque, an Albuquerque resident for those who don't know what that means. He's from New Mexico. He's an up-and-coming writer. He's a recent MFA graduate from the University of New Mexico. Woo! Go UNM. Congratulations out there. I'm speaking of none other than our good friend, Mr. Mario Montoya. Mario, take it away.
I received my first permanent scar before I was 2, living in a one-bedroom apartment with my parents in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The day it happened, my 5-year-old prima, Shauna, was tasked with supervising me while my mom disappeared to smoke a joint. A sweet aroma I'd later identify as marijuana seeped from under her door, a smell I'd get used to. Before I could even talk, I knew the smell of weed. My dad worked full-time for the state of New Mexico, doing what he described as working with computers. It paid better, and it was safer than roofing, which is what he busted his ass doing before I was born. My mom stayed home to raise me, but she struggled, not ready for motherhood. The party life still circulating through her bloodstream. That day, she was expecting company. Her drinking buddies applying makeup and curling her hair. In the bathroom, she sat me by the sink and offered her keys as a noisy distraction. Her makeup bag, brush, and hairspray were within reach. So was a plugged-in blow dryer and a live, red-hot curling iron. It was still heating up. Once her friends arrived, I was alone with Shauna, too small herself to remove me from the counter. The entertainment that she provided was tickling me on the marble while I wriggled and squirmed in laughter. I dropped the keys on the tiled floor, and with my unoccupied, curious hand, I searched for another object to grab. I found the curling iron, gripping it tight with chubby, uncoordinated fingers. Overheated metal melted my skin like a hot knife through butter. Iron stuck to my tiny palm. I couldn't let go. Strings of skin stretched like strands of gooey mozzarella. Even stranger, I responded with a clueless baby grin. Shauna must have smelt flesh cooking, the metal rods creating blisters and angry swelling. Covering her mouth, she screamed as my mom reappeared to witness the horror. Skin charred with third-degree burns. The fact that I wasn't crying, that didn't surprise her at all. Doctors warned that this might happen one day. After birth, in the delivery room, techs ran reflex tests that are typical for newborn babies. But I failed miserably. Poking and prodding with needles, they stuck my feet and hands, and for some unexplained reason, I wasn't reacting. I wasn't responding to the pain. Babies were supposed to cry. That's what parents wanted. Tears meant the baby passed the test. Proof that they'd grow to be happy, healthy, successful, and normal adults. A similar event occurred a month later before my previous burns even healed. On the phone one day, my mom didn't notice me crawl into our bedroom where her makeup bag had spilt to the floor. After playing in a pile of cosmetics, I went for the uncapped eyeliner pencil, which resembled a black crayon. I proceeded to make messy lines on the walls before turning the pencil on myself, drawing on my bare skin. I looked like a hardcore baby with tattoos, body, even my chest and face. Imitating my mom, I reached for the handheld sharpener, fumbling the tool. My thumb slipped over the razor, cutting a slash just under my nail bed. Blood flooded in scattered puddles, but I felt nothing. I only felt the wet, sticky film from the blood trickling down my hand. I was amused as I sat there and drew shapes and silly designs as I played in my own blood. Finally, 10 minutes later, my mom returned. "Oh my God, Mario," she yelled. "What happened here?" I didn't understand the panic in her voice. Seeing my own blood was as common as witnessing tap water from a faucet. I hurt myself all the time, sometimes several times a day, requiring constant adult supervision. Born with a condition called CIP, or congenital insensitivity to pain, my nerves hadn't developed normally. It made the pain that I felt, my pain tolerance, very high. What barely hurts me is excruciating and shocking pain for others, but I'm not completely numb. I feel basic touch, some internal soreness, extreme levels of hot and cold, yet my threshold for pain is muted. It's so rare, less than 1,000 people globally suffer from the disease at any given moment. I never met another survivor, but Oprah once had a show about CIP victims, and what little I do know, I learned recently online. Thank you.
Wow. 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 Mario Montoya is a teacher, he's a writer, he's an MC, and he is also the 2021 recipient of the Rudolfo Anaya Fellowship, honoring promising New Mexican writers. Mario, welcome to Behind the Screen, cool conversations with cool people. I think you definitely, with that opening bit, I think you definitely qualify as a cool person to talk to.
Thank you, Garland, and thank you for having me.
It is an absolute pleasure to have you here. This is since you brought it up in the first piece that you read. Let's talk about this for a second. This condition, CIP, congenital insensitivity to pain, or as it's also known as congenital analgesia. Apparently, according to my research, it's telling me here that it's one of the more rare conditions in which a person cannot feel and has never felt physical pain. Now, one would, I know a lot of people who would probably think, oh man, that would be great. What a superpower to have. I couldn't feel pain. Oh man, I could rescue people from burning buildings. I could do all sorts of stuff, but you're here to tell us it's not all that it's cracked up to be, right?
Yeah, definitely. Growing up with a situation where you don't feel pain is obviously very dangerous. When I was young, same thing as you were kind of speaking of, Garland, kids used to kind of look at me and they thought I was invincible, like maybe I was a superhero because I couldn't feel pain. And even me at a young age didn't quite understand what that meant. I didn't know what it meant to feel pain ever, so I never had anything to compare it to. But I was always injuring myself as a kid. I found myself getting wounds that I didn't even know I had. It took learning a system of checking my body in order to find wounds or cuts that were dangerous or maybe even getting infected. So I kind of had to develop my senses in other ways, right? I compare this a lot to people who are blind. People who are blind, they have to develop their hearing in order to navigate the world. And for me, I have to navigate the world by heightening my other senses. So I have to learn to listen a little bit better. I have to learn to look and catch things with my eyes a little better, because the physical sensation of pain, I have no idea of. So I injure myself. Uh, I don't know it, and it gets aggravated to the point of bone infection, or even worse, right? So
Yeah, that is that's the thing that people don't understand is that, yeah, it sounds like on the surface that might be a good thing because you could do a lot more things. But really, it ends up being rather limiting because you have to be aware. I mean, we were talking about this, you and I, recently, and I was the metaphor that came to my mind was like those Waymo autonomous cars, and they got that the lidar on the top, right? And the lidar is constantly going. Every second it's out there, 360 degrees, right? Recording everything so it doesn't hit anything, so it drives from point A to point B. Okay. I have to imagine that's got to be what it is like you. You've got to have your spider senses like always on at full in 360 degree, like the Starship Enterprise or something, right? And that has to be exhausting.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a lot of work, and I don't think that a lot of parents quite understand themselves. A lot of people with CIP, some parents have it because it is hereditary, but sometimes the gene skips generations. So my folks felt normal pain, and it was hard for them to understand how to raise a child who didn't feel pain when they had nothing to compare it to. And I also, my parents, I don't think they were both ready to be parents, much less ready to be parents of a kid who required so much supervision, and I mean, they could have probably followed me around everywhere I went all day in my childhood, and I still would have received injuries. It's just it's a really tough disease to navigate and to live with. And it affects you in so many different ways. We don't even realize, I think, how much we rely on physical pain sensation. Even touching things and grabbing onto things. Sometimes handling things can be complicated for me because I grip them tight. I hold on to them tighter than usual because my sensation is just so out of whack. So, I do feel touch, right? Like I can feel myself touching, my face right now. I can shut my eyes and I'm touching the bookshelf, and I know that, right? But it's the pain element of touch that I'm not registering. And it's such a dangerous thing. Like you can't see it now, but I have a leg amputation. And I received that leg amputation as a direct result from not feeling pain. I got a wound when I was young, maybe about 10. The wound got infected inside the flesh, so it was just a basic flesh wound. But that infection traveled into the bone. And once it hit the bone, it started kind of accessing the blood, right? And so that infection was traveling in my blood, which made me septic. Septic meaning my blood was basically infected, and it was making me sick. It was, on its way to my heart, and if it would have reached my heart, I would have passed away. So, in that moment, the doctor, made the decision to save my life and amputate my leg. Which seems like a pretty sad story as I'm telling it. But to be quite honest with you, losing my leg was the best thing that ever happened to me. And the reason why is kind of, as I mentioned before, I didn't really have a lot of guidance as a kid. I was a very angry little boy. I was mad because I didn't really feel like I had parents there to be that foundation and to be that rock. And then I was so different than other kids, right? I walked different. My hands were different. I always had cuts that were always kind of scabby, and sometimes infected, and even kind of nasty looking. So kids teased me and they bullied me and they made fun of me, which that's how kids are. But it did build a lot of anger in my heart. So being mad at my parents, being mad at my situation, I was lashing out. I was doing drugs real young. I started smoking pot at like 11, experimenting with alcohol at about 12 or 13, and even some harder drugs by the time I was 13, and younger. Maybe about 14 is when I was trying things like cocaine. So I lost my virginity young to an abusive situation, and I just all that built in me, right? So losing my leg was almost that crazy thing that I needed to happen, that life altering moment. And even though I was 14 and I was very young, I was ready for it. I almost wanted, without knowing it, right? Subconsciously, I almost wanted something to rock my world and force me to change my thinking and my attitude. And again, of course, I still have bad days. I still struggle as a man in a wheelchair with one leg missing. But I do my best to keep a good attitude and just kind of remember that I was on a path for worse. I think I might have ended up in jail, possibly dead, addicted to drugs, which drug addiction is huge in my family. along with incarceration. So these things I think were part of my future unless I lost my leg. So
That is, that's really amazing. But it's a story that actually is not that uncommon. There have been other people who've had other similar, what would be considered tragedies. I mean, losing your leg, that's kind of a big deal, right? But there are other people who've had various things like that, amputations, various whatever. But they've also come to recognize that it brought something out in them, or it brought them opportunities, or it just brought them to a whole other place that they really loved being at, but might never have ever had the chance to get to had they not had this seemingly tragic thing happen to them. Right now, how ironic is that? I mean, it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful because, if you look at it, and also I know everything is a matter of perspective, right? So if you look at it from one perspective, my God, you have every right to be angry and hate the world and be like, F you, F the world, and, be in your little F you bubble, your little anger bubble. But you didn't do that. You didn't choose to do that. You chose to see the opportunity. That's brilliant. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
yeah, well, sometimes I think, and it sounds cliche, right? Like, things happen for a reason. And, even as I say it, I'm kind of like, well, that's overused, but maybe it's overused for reasons. I think that something in me was ready to change. I think that, whatever, God or spiritual entity that exists, that's bigger than us, kind of took it there with me. I think I was ready to impact the world in a different way than being angry. And so, I went for it, right? I just went ahead and changed the way I thought. And of course, it didn't happen overnight. It was a long process of maybe a couple months. But something that did, I would say, also kind of keep me on track of wanting to grow and not allow my leg to pull me down, because, the opportunity was there to go ahead and just, start doing drugs and kind of give up, right? I could even make, money with Social Security and just live out my life without really accomplishing anything. But one thing that I would kind of pay homage to, or I might even say saved me, is hip hop culture. So when I was really young, at the age that I was really angry and I was doing these crazy things that I shouldn't have been doing, I discovered rap music. And the first rap music I got into was a lot more gang related, and that was the reason why I liked it, because it was angry just like I was, right? So I'm talking like Too Short and Easy E, right? And rappers that, Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, NWA, rappers that cussed and used the F word and dropped the B word. And of course, I'm different now, but at the time, I related to the anger in the message. And so I was really into rap music. I used to write raps off to the side and kind of just try my hand at it. But what really got me into it was when I lost my leg. I lost my leg at 14. I was right getting ready to go to high school, and I worked at the flea market. It is kind of what really was the change, the catalyst, was working at the flea market. Because at the flea market there were so many different types of people, and there was this one guy who came from New York once a month. His name is DJ Smooch, and he actually lives here in Albuquerque still. He has a hip hop shop here in Albuquerque. But he was driving back in 94. This is like 94, 95, 1995, driving from New York to Albuquerque. And he was bringing these like amazing mixtapes that you had no access to in the Southwest. Like, there was no way people from Arizona or New Mexico, Colorado, maybe even in California, certain places, they didn't really have access to this music. DJ Tony Touch was one of them. Another one was a DJ Stretch Armstrong. But the music they played blew me away because it was rap music, but it was so different than what I was used to. It wasn't gangster. It wasn't glorifying criminality. It wasn't glorifying mistreatment of women. In a way, it was about knowledge. It was about intelligence. It was about uplifting yourself. And some of the artists that I'm talking about are like, the Wu-Tang Clan. On this mixtape, I discovered the Wu-Tang Clan. And the RZA was a big influence on me, right? The producer of the Wu-Tang Clan. He talked a lot about reading and playing chess. He mentioned the Hagakure, which is a book of wisdom that's read by Japanese folks and by the samurai. the Book of the Samurai. So, I got really enthralled by that because it was so different than what I was used to with the violence and the gang banging, right? So another one was KRS-One. KRS-One changed my life. I never really realized that rappers could be so intelligent and so wise. And something that KRS-One taught me was, building your knowledge was taking care of yourself. He seeked knowledge. He talked about being 14 and being homeless. And instead of being out on the streets as a 14-year-old, he would go to the library and he would study and try to gain knowledge. So I was really impressed by him. And what these men did for me is kind of showed me that uh, not only was rap music intelligent, but it was uplifting and maybe even part of a culture. I started doing more research. I got into Nas, I got into Gangstar, and then I even started learning about this culture, right? Not just the music, because sometimes when we say hip hop, we're talking about rap music. But even outside of rap music, I started learning about the Zulu Nation, which was a group of men who wanted to uplift their community, right, and develop their community in a positive way. I started learning about Rocksteady Crew, which is a handful of break dancers, right? I started learning about b-boying and b-girling and breaking. So that was another thing about another part of hip hop. I started learning about graffiti and graffiti writing. And of course, the normal concept was graffiti is gang related. It's based on territory. It's bad. But I learned this other angle to it. I learned this self-expression, this idea of developing yourself or advertising yourself. I have a cousin here in Albuquerque. His name is Rock. He's a famous graffiti writer in the Southwest. He's a well-known graffiti writer all through hip hop. And so I really started to get this idea that hip hop was uplifting communities and not breaking them down. And I was all for it. I wanted knowledge. I wanted to grow. And I wanted to be part of this thing that was artistic and expressive and free. Yet it was also still, concerned with its community and concerned with social justice and things like that. So yeah, hip hop is a big part of my life.
And in the midst of your hip hop revelations, I'll call them, your hip hop experience, you also picked up a brush and a spray can, and you started doing some graphic work, some visual work, and we have a couple of examples here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about them?
Okay. These are a couple examples of some graffiti that I did, within the past 5 years. I'm not as active as I used to be with the graffiti scene. And the main reason why is because I went to grad school and got more into the writing world. But I've always been artistic in all elements. And when it comes to hip hop, especially, I tried a little DJing. I tried a little break dancing. But the ones that fit with me, I think the most are the rapping, right? The rhyming, the poetry part of it, which fits into my writing, and then the graffiti. So I got really into painting, and these two pieces are some examples of some of my recent work. The bottom one here that's under me as I speak is a piece that I did in the Bay Area with me and my cousin Rock, my cousin Doms, and my homie King 157. So King 157 is a really well-known, popular graffiti writer. He's well-known all over the West Coast. But we all got together. We did this piece in the Mission District in San Francisco. And the way we did it was all Star Wars themed. So you'll notice, you have my name there, and then you have the little droid, right? The little BB-8 guy. And I used him as my
Right.
O. And then all the other people, they kind of incorporated characters as well of Star Wars into their names. So you can't really see that. Unfortunately, it's like a 4 or 5 name piece. It's kind of a big production. But yeah, it's all kind of working together with the Star Wars theme.
Mm.
And then the one here on the left, I did in Albuquerque, here in Burque, where I'm from. It just says my name, Soul. They both say Soul, which is my graffiti name. It's the name, it's not the Spanish word for sun, right? So on the left, you can't really see it, but my buddy Chale, he's a good friend of mine. His name is Albert Rosales. He's a Chicano artist, and he did a version of Guadalupe there on the side. So that's the Mother Mary. It's beautiful, but you can't really see it, unfortunately. And then on the right side, King 157, who I've mentioned already, did a piece of me in a wheelchair. It's like a cartoon character. It's really dope. You see it there, you can just kind of see my hand. But yeah, it's really fat. And, if you check out my website, which I believe a link will be provided for you to check that out, you'll have access to these pictures. You'll have access to that character of me in a wheelchair, right? The cartoon character. And then also all my work as well.
That's
Can't
really
quite hear
beautiful
you.
work. And I grew up in New York. See, I need help running my own shows. See, this is what
It's
happens.
okay.
This is why I founded the company, is to keep that from happening. Anyway, I grew up in New York, and so riding the subways in the 1970s and the 1980s, on up into the 90s. And I remember the graffiti covered cars, and some of that artwork was really amazing. And yours definitely would fit right in. Would fit right in there. You captured that spirit, even though it wasn't the 70s or the 80s. You captured that spirit, I believe. So yeah, we will
Awesome.
definitely have
Thank
a
you.
we'll definitely have a link into your website down in the description, down below in the YouTube description, so folks can go check it out because we want people to see more of your work. And I think you may have some more of your pieces up there too. At least I hope you do. So that'll be great. Now also you've become over the years, as you've dealt with your own condition with COP and losing your leg, etc., you become kind of would you say, kind of an activist for the cause a little bit? I mean, for disabled, because you and I have discussed the idea, the concept, and I will admit I'm not as familiar as I probably should be with it, but the concept of ableism and
Mm,
how that how that affects how people are treated, how quote unquote disabled people are treated, what's created for them. And I know that in this country we have the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a civil rights law that prohibits discrimination against individuals with disabilities in all areas of public life, including jobs, schools, transportation, and all public and private places that are open to the general public. And this is very important, but this is also not the standard across the world. You've done some traveling, right?
mhm.
So you know about kind of what's going on with this a little bit. Yes?
Yes, I would say that America, in comparison, is doing a decent job of paying attention to folks with different abilities. I'll say, and the reason why I'm real careful with my language is part of the reason why I would like to talk about ableism, because we all kind of make common mistakes as we describe folks with different abilities. But going back to this idea about America versus the rest of the world, there's places in Asia, the kind of like an old world Asia idea where they don't really have an ADA, they don't really have laws where they accommodate there are people with limitations. They don't have wheelchair ramps. They don't require elevators in all buildings. There's kind of this idea that if you can't participate normally, quote unquote, normally in their society, then you're kind of casted off, right? Maybe even institutionalized. So, that doesn't happen here in America. And I'm so grateful for that, right? Being a man with one leg who uses a wheelchair, I'm super grateful for that. But I also would admit that we've got a lot of work to do, even in America. Nowadays we're really hip to the ideas of racism, or at least we're trying to be, right, with Black Lives Matter and some of the other people of color movements. So, and that's good, right? We're not quite there yet, but we're making some strides, and we're trying to use our language differently. We're trying to describe people based on what they want to be called, stuff like that, right? Same thing with gender and sexism, right? We're learning about trans folks and how they like to be described, and pronouns and things like that. Um, but when it comes to the concept of ableism, so we got racism, we got sexism, and there's a handful other isms, but one ism that we do not talk about much in this country and all over the world is ableism. The idea of limiting or even being prejudiced in without even knowing it, right, towards folks who have limited mobility or different ableness. And again, I'm trying to use my words carefully because commonly we say, well, handicapped people, or we say crippled people, or immobile people. There's all these ways of describing folks with these limitations. But we know that language can be damaging, right? We know that language can be part of what creates negative viewpoints and opinions of people. So we're trying to get used to describing folks who have these limitations better, right? They're differently abled. It's not that they're limited, but they're differently abled because they're not limited. There's plenty of things they can do. Sure, there's things they can't do, but there's things that everybody can't do, right? So we don't walk around saying everybody's limited. We shouldn't do that to folks who have different abilities. Even the concept of being in a wheelchair. I get told all the time, I'm in a wheelchair. And even though I don't really take offense to that, I find pride in that. As a matter of fact, I see my wheelchair as an extension of my body, almost like my legs, or almost part of my waist. I mean, you could say that. At least I see it that way. But I do understand people getting offended when you say, well, they're in a wheelchair, like they have no other existence and they have no other ability. They're just in this wheelchair, right? We want to get used to saying, well, they use a wheelchair, they use a walker, they use crutches, they use a speaking or hearing device, those kind of concepts. Because, if we keep using this negative language, then we continue to have this negative viewpoint of people with different abilities, right? They're handicapped, they're crippled, they have no ability, poor them. And we need to get out of this idea, right? It's not poor them. People with limited mobilities or different abilities are really super capable, which I would like to be a proof of. So, I'm not necessarily, I wouldn't necessarily describe myself as an activist, but I would like to be a voice. And if that turns me into an activist, so be it. But I would definitely like to be a voice to speak up for differently abled people, because right now there isn't a lot. There are some voices here and there, especially in the creative writing world. There's even a genre called disability studies, right? Which, listen to the term right there, right? Disability studies. Even that needs to be changed. But, we're making progress, I hope, and I would like to be a voice that can add to that progress.
Well, you definitely, I believe, are a voice. I mean, because, well, first of all, just like, the premise I said about cool things come from cool conversations, what we're talking about is language. It all starts with language. An idea, something, an image, something forms up in here, but without language, language is the tool we use to get it from up here to hear to your ears, to somebody else's ears, and into somebody else's brain, right? So it's the language. You have to have some kind of language. Now that language, we've proven it can be verbal, it can be written. People use sign language. You can use sign language, right? You can use tapping rocks. I mean, but something has to be there, right? There has to be some kind of language. So language is crucial. Language is key. And so as a writer, every time you speak out on this, and every time you write about it, every time you publish about it, you're helping to shape the language. Because what's happening, the way I see it, is all these things we've been dealing with the last few years, especially, ableism, disability, right, racism, sexism, Me Too, the patriarchy, all this sort of stuff, we've been dealing with. But it's like, it's wonderful that we're finally, even though it's incredibly painful, it is in some sense wonderful that we're finally starting to grapple with these issues seriously as a culture, as a whole. But because we're in the early stages of doing it, our language is still so clunky and so just undeveloped, and so raw, and because there is no accepted standard of it all and what have you, people are just throwing stuff in all the time. So you have fire bombs happening, people getting crazy, scandal, and all sorts of stuff, So, I think what you're doing with the language is very, very important.
Thank you. Yeah.
Do you agree that the language, though, that we have now is, we're still grappling with even how to say it, pronouns, for example, right?
Yes, definitely. Yes, and it's a fast changing world, and even the language, as you speak about language, even the language is changing fast, right? Here we are, we're learning that we need to have different pronouns for different people, and that's a beautiful thing, but it's also not an easy thing to do when you don't come from that, right? And I'm not making excuses.
Yes.
I was born in the 80s, and we weren't really doing that, even though we should have been. And even in the 90s, we weren't really doing that. Here we are in the 2010s, and we're learning how to do that. And I'm all aboard with that, because just as much as I would like people to describe me differently, I understand the need for me to describe them differently. I also would like to admit, though, that I'm going to make mistakes, not because I want to or because I'm being lazy or because there's a prejudice there. But there is an ignorance that I'm trying to lose, right? And sometimes even now I have friends who are trans, and I call them the wrong thing, and I feel really gracious when they correct me without getting upset. When they're like, "Hey, well, make sure you say they," or make sure I like to be called she, right? And I'm like, "Okay, I'm sorry, my bad. I'll do better." And of course, I got to have the intent to actually do better, but there is no guarantee that I'm not going to make that mistake, because my brain is so hardwired in a different way. But I'm working on changing that wiring. It's just going to take some time, and I would like people out there to know it's the same thing with folks who are differently abled. You're going to maybe describe me as handicapped. You might say that I'm disabled, and I think it's up to me to not get offended. Do I need to speak up and correct? Yes, I do. I need to say, hey, honestly, I like to be considered differently abled. And if they get mad or they don't get mad is up to them, right? But I'm hoping that out of all of our ignorance and a desire to get intelligent with it, we can have the conversation without getting upset, right? I can correct you, you can say you're sorry, and we can move on. Because I really don't think learning is going to happen when we throw shame at people, right? Or we try to make them feel guilty for being human and making mistakes. Young kids nowadays, they're a lot more hip to this idea of using the right pronouns, or making sure that they call people what they want to be called based on their ethnicity, right? Same thing with handicaps, and differently ableness, and we just got to find a way to have common ground and have respect, but still step up and voice our concerns and our issues.
Have it now. You've had some occasions where you've had to kind of correct some folks, right? Correct some folks, and how has that gone in general? Have you found that people are in general open to that, or are they kind of hostile or embarrassed, or how's that kind of gone for it? And it sounds like you approach it with a lot of empathy. So I'm just curious how that's gone for you.
I think right now the world is struggling so much with racism and sexism that when I voice my issues about ableism, I think sometimes it's not taken as serious. I think sometimes it falls on deaf ears. And I think that has a lot to do with my community. I was, raised here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and it's a very Chicano, Native American community. And there's a lot of machismo in this community, a lot of tough macho-ness, a lot of male-dominated, I would say, sort of thinking. Unfortunately, it's very patriarchal here, and so telling somebody that you would like for them to be more sensitive doesn't always fly. Especially when there's like, well, can you be more sensitive towards differently abled people? It's still kind of archaic, and it's thinking of, well, hey, you're not the majority, so we're not going to be concerned with you. And that happens again within even my own family. I think subconsciously. I don't think anybody does this with malice, but I don't think people take ableism seriously. I don't think they even take people with different abilities seriously at all, right? People with different abilities aren't always considered intelligent just by the look at them, right? You can look at me and you might say, well, he's in a wheelchair, or he uses a wheelchair, but you might say he's in one, right? And because of that, he can't do a lot of things. He might not even be smart. He might not even be able to go to college, right? They would never know that I graduated with an MFA. So, it's still a little rocky to ask people to be a little careful with these words, but I think little by little we'll get there, because if you look 100 years ago, even ethnicity wasn't being talked about with a lot of enthusiasm, so we're getting there. It's going to be a slow process, and I'm just going to keep on trucking and keep on kind of putting it in their face, and it's going to take some time to get people to be a lot more equal with folks who have different abilities, but we've got to start trying. We've got to start somewhere. So
absolutely, and I love that, differently abled. I like that. Disability, just already you're starting off with a negative. right?
Mhm.
Right? You said
Mhm.
unity, me, that, he dissed
Mhm.
me, and what have you.
Mhm.
So you're starting already.
Exactly.
So right there, you're already starting off on the wrong foot. And as you point out, yeah, there are lots of things that someone, just because someone doesn't have the use of their legs and has to be in a chair. I love the fact that you said earlier that you view your wheelchair as an extension of your body. I
Mhm.
feel like that's the way Dr. Stephen Hawking approached it, and he really leaned into it, and he had that incredible chair that allowed him to talk, that actually gave him a whole identity that
Mhm.
became a celebrity identity even. I
Mhm.
mean, here's a guy
Mhm.
he can't move, but yet we all learned so much from him. So
Yeah,
that's
he's a
good.
beautiful example because he totally embraced his position and
Hmm.
had no embarrassment about it,
Hmm.
and forced a lot of people around him to respect him just as much as they would have if he would have been fully able, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So I agree with you, and I think Stephen Hawking is a great example of that. And there's so much more. There's mountain climbers who climb without their limbs. There's
Hmm.
a young man who's in a wheelchair and he skateboards. And when I say skateboards, I don't mean just like skating around with his friends. Like, he does ollies and flips and flies in the sky 100 feet in the air, and lands the wheelchair, and it
Hmm.
breaks himself into pieces. But just like a skateboarder would do, get
Hmm.
up and go again. So this guy makes no excuses for his ability. And I admire him truly. His name is Wills. If
Hmm.
you want to check him out online, I don't know his real name, but
Hmm.
yeah.
I'm sure we could find him on YouTube. That's a yeah. See, that's amazing, and so sometimes, when I see people, people who, for all intents and purposes, everything's working. You got your two limbs, you got your two legs, you got your eyes, you got everything's all kind of working. It's all pretty good and what have you. You can do stuff, and I know people have mental issues too that they have to deal with. All of us, we all have to deal with these things too. But sometimes I feel like when I hear people complaining who have a body that works, right? Complaining about the lack of this or that or whatever, and I think, oh my God, I remember seeing a story a few years back of a man. This young man, he had an accident, I believe it was, and then he was paralyzed from the neck down, couldn't move a thing from the neck down,
Mm.
completely, totally paraplegic. But the man had his own dance company. He was a
Wow.
choreographer. He was choreographing dancers, and his company was working. They were doing shows and well respected and selling tickets and just so I thought that
Wow.
when I saw that I thought to myself, Lord have mercy, I have nothing ever to complain about. Because if someone that is dealing with that, with the loss of what is that, 90% of the body, right? Use of the
Mhm.
body,
Mhm.
but
Right.
still taking that, what's left, and expanding it, to even greater than they could have been had they not had to deal with that right
Mhm.
situation. So that's really incredible. I'm curious, has COVID and the pandemic and the new work from home opportunities and the idea that we're going to be having, the companies are wrestling with a work from home hybrid model, has that opened up opportunities, do you think, for differently abled people?
I would say definitely, and in some ways maybe even not. I really wouldn't know. From my experience, I would, of course, I would guess for sure because it gives us access to the entire world. And if we can't leave our home or it's difficult to leave our home, we can still accomplish a lot of things like attend class or even teach a class. I taught as a TA in grad school this whole, past 2 or 3 semesters using Zoom, and I was able to accomplish a lot. So I would imagine I would imagine that it's opened a lot of doors, um, because everything is virtual and you don't have to actually leave your house. For me, in some ways it was detrimental though because I like to be social. I like to challenge myself out in the world, and I need exercise. I'm in a manual wheelchair as opposed to a battery operated wheelchair, so I can still move a lot of my body, my arms, my waist, my chest. And I've noticed I've lost a lot of muscle and gained some chubbiness because of the pandemic, just like everybody, right?
COVID
And so
fat, a little COVID fat,
right,
right?
right. So being stuck in the house, I'm like, oh, I just want to. And I've also kind of had to take it upon myself to just get in my wheelchair and push myself, right, for like 7 blocks and come turn around and come back to give myself that exercise. But it's it's had its pros and it's had its cons, and I think we could probably all admit to that right now. And it's nice that things are slowly starting to open up. I think people that are differently abled are still nervous and a little skeptical because a lot of us are vulnerable. So we're being careful, but it's made. I think it's made its impact on all of us, and for those who are differently abled, I think so too. Definitely. It's hard for me to really say how, especially because everybody's differently abled differently, right?
Sure.
But for me, it's been good and it's been bad, and in a way, I'm looking forward to things, getting back to some normalcy, and whatever that's going to look like. Which I don't think things will ever be the same, but yeah.
Right. Well, was things like going to the gym regularly on your schedule, or getting out there, or do you like do long distance, in your chair to, what do you do for that?
I definitely got into a habit of exercising without even knowing I was exercising. To get to the bus, I had to push myself. All over the UNM campus, I had to push myself. When I had jobs before I even went to grad school, I had to go to the bus. There was a lot of movement on my part, and I was getting all this crazy exercise just by living, and I didn't even know that I was getting exercise. And now I've got to be a lot more conscious about it. I've got to actually decide, okay, I got to go work out, right? I got to go work out at this time. I got to push myself just to get the blood moving and get the muscles moving and keep the bone strong. So, and I think people who are differently abled have that problem. I mean, it's easy for us to relax and just kind of chill if we don't have a lot of expectation. We have to put that expectation on ourselves because no one's going to do it for us. So that's kind of what I see myself doing now. I'm not getting into it as fast as I would like, but I would like within the maybe in the next couple weeks or so, get into a physical kind of routine and stay fit because believe it or not, it's easy to get lazy as a differently abled person. Sure. And then, as they say, use it or lose it, right? Use it or lose it. So
that applies to everybody, right? Whether you're differently abled or fully abled or whatever. So that's something. Now, let me shift gears a little bit here, get back into the literary world, if you will, and into the writing world a little bit. We definitely want to hear some more reading from you in just a moment or two. But first, you've recently, or in recent history, you've caught the eye of one of New Mexico's greatest treasures, greatest writers, one of America's greatest poets alive today, and an author who with over 30 books to his name and many, many awards and is beloved across the world internationally. And I'm of course referring to our good friend, Mr. Jimmy Santiago Baca. And he's recently, tapped you on the shoulder for some things. You were at his 8th annual retreat recently in June. I know I saw you there. I was there virtually, so I saw you performing at the Albuquerque Museum. You did a wonderful set. So, can you talk a little bit about how did you and Jimmy come to meet, and how did it because I believe he's a bit of a hero of yours. Am I right in saying that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. The movie Blood In, Blood Out is what brought me to Jimmy. And I think the movie Blood In, Blood Out brought a lot of the world to Jimmy, especially if you're a Chicano man or a Chicano male. Most people, I would say, from California all the way to New York, if you're a Chicano man, maybe even if you're a Chicana woman, you're influenced by this movie. Before Blood In, Blood Out, we didn't, have a lot of representation in movies as Chicanas and Chicanos. And if we did, we were always the villains and the bad guys of the story, right? Same thing with the native folks and even black folks in certain senses. But with Blood In, Blood Out, even though these are gangsters and they are in and out of prison, there is a fabric to their story and to their life that's captivated on or that's captured on cinema that is real and very relatable if you're a Chicana or a Chicano. Just growing up in the barrio and having the different issues with language and incarceration and gangs and stuff like that. That's a reality, whether we like it or not, that exists with Chicanas and Chicanos because we're disenfranchised people, right? We're not the majority in most cases. So, at a young age, I was looking for some kind of representation of myself, especially in Hollywood, and I saw it in Blood In and Blood Out. And as I became like a huge fan of the movie, I did my research and found out who wrote it. And the writer was Jimmy Santiago Baca. And that was the beginning of a long study, if you will, of Jimmy Santiago Baca. Because once I found out who he was and then discovered that he was from New Mexico, which is where I was from, I was hungry for more. And so I went to the bookstore. I purchased Martin and Meditations, which is one of his poetry books. And then I started getting more of them, the Black Mesa poems. I got like almost his entire collection of poetry books. And I was just obsessed because I was reading these poems and they were speaking to me and they were about me and they were about people like me, people from where I was from. And I didn't see that very often in literature. Of course, there's Rudy Anaya was another one, but I related a little bit more to Jimmy Santiago Baca. And after I checked out all his poetry books, I got his memoir, which is what you're showing on the screen now, A Place to Stand. And the thing that blew my mind as I started learning more about Jimmy was not only where he came from, but some of the ordeals or the tribulations that he rose above. Reading A Place to Stand, I discovered that he was even though he was bilingual, he was illiterate for, a good third of his life. And that blew my mind. Here's this great poet who's got multiple books and they're award-winning books. But at one time in his life, he was illiterate. And I couldn't, it was hard for me to totally grasp that. And then when you read the memoir and you discover that he learned how to read and write while in prison, right? He stole some books and struggled with the language until he made himself read and then write. I thought that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. Here's a man locked up. He's incarcerated. He's considered a criminal by his society. And in order to save himself, he teaches himself to read and write. And not just write, letters and whatnot or love letters to his girlfriends, but beautiful, heart-touching and heart-wrenching poetry. It just blew my mind. I couldn't believe it. I was so proud of him. I wanted to be, I looked up to him. I wanted to overcome, my shortcomings in the same way with words and beautiful stories. So, I became a huge fan, started writing a lot. And I was writing a little bit before that too, but got really into writing, got accepted into grad school in the year 2017. And then in grad school, I was teaching an English class. It was actually an English Chicano studies class. It was kind of combined. And in there, I had a student who knew Jimmy Santiago Baca. She was her mom was a long life friend of Jimmy's. And so she was like, I can bring him to the class. And I really didn't believe she would actually do it. I didn't think, I didn't even know she was really honest about knowing him, but I gave her the green light. I said, go talk to him, see if he would like to join. And he came to my class, and it was awesome. He spoke to my students. He read a little bit from some of his books, and I was just blown away. Again, I met him. He was a really nice man. I got his email, and we loosely kept in touch. But at the end of my grad program, I had my dissertation. I needed somebody on my committee who was an reader. I got brave enough to reach out to him, send him an email, was like, hey, Jimmy, do you remember me? You taught in my class. He did remember me. I said, hey, man, you willing to be in my committee, my dissertation committee? You'll have to read my book. And he was up for it. He was very generous, very kind. And I sent him my book. And he worked with me. He gave me pointers on how I can make it stronger. He gave me a lot of encouragement. He told me where I was on the right path. And then he started giving me a lot of opportunities. One of them being, this right now. I've been doing a lot of readings with him. I've been writing a couple other books, kind of side projects about some Burqueños that are real well known here in Albuquerque. So I've become real busy, or at least a lot more busy because of Jimmy. And I really appreciate him, not only as a mentor and as kind of like a hero of mine, but I think we're becoming friends, and that means a lot to me because he's a remarkable man that has really kind of, just been awesome enough to guide me. So, I hope that we continue to work together and get stronger as friends, and just see what goes from there.
I'm sure you will. I have no doubt because I've known Jimmy for about 15 years and going on 15 years, and that definitely is Jimmy. That sounds exactly like Jimmy. And Jimmy is he has an eye for talent. He has an eye for recognizing talent. He's also, as you pointed out, really inspirational. His story is just so inspirational. If folks out there don't know his story, you need to go read up about it. It's very amazing. Abandoned by parents, growing up in the hard neighborhood in New Mexico. There, I mean, really hard. Crime being the only way at some point that for him to make a way for himself, which of course unfortunately led to prison. But going into prison, at an age where he didn't not knowing how to read at all, but yet coming out an incredible poet. So it's a fascinating story. He is a fascinating and very inspirational human being, and he clearly saw something in you. He clearly saw something in you. I know Jimmy. He doesn't just invite people just who he doesn't think has something to offer. So that's the one thing he'll never bring somebody up that he doesn't fully believe has something to offer, something genuine.
And it's such an honor, to be working with him and to be getting that encouragement. So I continue to take that in humbly. I know that I've got growing to do, as we all do, and as an artist, I want to be the best artist, best writer I can be. So I'm going to kind of stay under his wing as long as he allows it, and
Mm-hmm.
and soak in and learn what I can, and then create myself some opportunities, and follow in his footsteps. I mean, there's a long line of great writers from New Mexico that kind of walk in his footsteps, even whether in front of him or behind him, right? I mean, Rudy Anaya, as I mentioned, Anna Castillo lives here, even though she's from Chicago. And, Jimmy will always be one of my favorite people and favorite writers. So, man, it's a blessing and an honor to be hanging with him.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, you are absolutely doing what he would want you to do. You are, and he is blazing this path for people just like you. So, so this is absolutely perfect. And speaking of you being an artist and being the best writer you can be, let's hear something else for you before we have to get out of here.
Okay. I'm going to read a little bit from chapter 6 in my memoir. It's about my mom. The chapter is called Maria Curbs. The book is called Numb, The Boy Who Couldn't Feel. That's a working title. But I'll go ahead and read this scene real quick. It's split into two scenes, so I'm going to read the first part. Then I'm actually going to skip a few paragraphs and go down to the bottom and continue on from there. Okay. We're halfway home, heading north on Rio Grande Boulevard down the narrow, windy two-lane road. It's a major street that turns residential as it heads towards the river, outlined by farmland and prime real estate, dotted with mansions. My mom calls these the back roads, a way to avoid detection. It's past midnight, but it's brighter than usual. The lamplights are reflecting off the snow and back into the sky. Even the clouds glow like a dim night light. Snowfall is steadily accumulating and blocking my visibility. We barely see any tail lights in front of us, and the road beneath us is turning ice. A car in front of us has slid multiple times. On the tape deck, my mom blares Bon Jovi, her favorite. She has a crush on John. The song is living on a prayer, and she is yelling the lyrics like an off-key opera singer. Slurring and butchering the language, rewriting the tune in her own words, she swerves in and out of lanes, Budweiser heavy on her breath. The windows fog from her screaming, but it's too cold to roll them down. Somehow my little sister, Michelle, snores in the back seat. As I supervise, I'm keeping my mom from passing out and driving off the road. I'm also looking out for cops, a challenge she has bestowed on her 13-year-old son, and it's not even the first time. Don't fall asleep, Hito, she says. Watch out for pigs, okay? But my mind is dragging along with my tired body, and I'm fading out. To stay awake, my mom convinces me to sing along, nudging me with her elbow. So I join in. I screw up the words too, and I start laughing. We are a terrible two-person choir. We are a train wreck of sound. Whoa, ho, we're halfway there. Whoa, living on a prayer, take my hand and we'll make it smash. The sound of colliding metal and glass invades me. The world becomes a loud white, whiter than snow. Two piercing headlights are burnt into my retina, face smashed against the dashboard, then the window, then the door. Everything goes silent until I hear Michelle cry from the back seat, a blood-curdling scream that regathers my senses. My mom struggles to unbuckle her own seatbelt, dirty blonde hair knocked in her face, blood dripping from her nose. She manages to get free and checks on Michelle, who seems shaken but mostly okay. Mario, are you all right? She asks. I think so. What happened? The guy just came into our lane. Despite the commotion, a strange calmness comes over me. I'm alive and I'm grateful for that. I'm talking, I'm responding, and besides the smashed vehicle, everything seems fine. The car is totaled, but that's replaceable. A cold breeze passes through the busted out windshield. Light snow makes its way inside the front seat, and glass is everywhere. Some shards are even down my shirt and in my jeans. Sirens moan in the distance, growing louder. I turn to Michelle, wiping debris off her lap. Then I notice terror in her eyes. Oh my God, Mom, she screams. Look at Mario. What's wrong with his forehead? Oh shit, my mom says. Don't touch it. I disobey. Don't touch what? I reach up to feel loose skin and oily blood on my fingers. I'm told part of my eyebrow is split in two. Meat and flesh hang, exposed like an open book. I say ouch, like I'm supposed to, even though I can't feel the wound. I'm crying, not because it hurts, but because it doesn't, and the blood keeps coming. Okay, I'm skipping down to the final part of the scene here. My mom is struggling to reach the garage a mere 3 months after our crash in the snow. After she received broken nose and after she received a major concussion, while my sister didn't get a single scratch. 12 stitches got sutured into my left eyebrow. I missed school due to facial swelling, and for a week I thought I looked like a monster. Yet after all that, my mom hadn't learned her lesson. Now she's stumbling drunk towards the extra car, bumping into things, mumbling Bon Jovi to herself. She's holding her keys, clutching a six-pack. The song is Wanted Dead or Alive. I tell her to hand me the keys. I don't have to listen to you, boy. I'm the parent here, not you. I laugh because I know her statement is debatable. At this point, we've switched roles. She's the rebellious teen, and I'm the responsible parent with no life experience to boot. She stumbles into the driver's seat, and she turns on the ignition, nearly shutting the door on her own leg. She revs the accelerator. She shifts out of park and cranks Bon Jovi. I position myself behind the car. Move, you little motherfucker, she says, rolling down her window, or I'll run your ass over. No, you'll have to run me over then, I say. Okay, fine. She inches in reverse, studying the driveway and surrounding area in her rearview mirror. There's bushes and a cactus and a tree and a mailbox, so she stops. She has no reasonable way out. Fine, you little asshole, she says. Not like I can't drink here. Right in the car. I'll stand here all night if I have to, I threaten. So she reclines the driver's seat. You'll get tired soon. But one beer and 2 Bon Jovi songs in, she passes out snoring. I smile and let her sleep it off in the car. In the morning, I bring her a glass of lukewarm water and an ibuprofen. But in less than a week, she'll be at it again. Thank you.
Wow. Wow. You know, it's funny for, when you hit the part about her passing out and snoring in the car, I couldn't help but think of Homer Simpson for some reason. I just, if you actually had Homer Simpson for a parent, what would that be like? And I mean, that was a moment that might have been a little bit like that. So
Mm.
wow, that's something. Thank you so much. A little bit more I want to go through before we're starting to, the clock's starting to wind down on us here. But before we get to that inevitable end where we have to cut it off and let people get on with their lives, I want to talk about something that I guess I'm calling the power of love. You know, the power of love. I always like that Huey Lewis song. I'm really dating myself. The power of love. You know, well, but we were talking about Bon Jovi, right? So who's dating who, right? Um, but the power of love. And now we've talked about, and you've told me, and you have to share this. We've talked about two things under the heading of power of love, and that was a plant and a dog. So I'll let you take it from there.
Okay. I'll try to sum this story up because it's in my book. It's a big part of my book. But basically, as I had mentioned, I was raised without a lot of support from my folks. They were, my dad was a serious workaholic, and as you could tell from what I just read, my mom had substance issues, mainly alcohol. She was a big drinker. She got me stoned for the first time when I was 11 or 12. So I didn't really have parents, I would say. Of course, in the fashion that they paid the bills and they were there, but they weren't, right? They were absent. So I grew up kind of neglected and didn't really have a lot of access to love relationships. I never really told my dad I loved him because he was so machismo and so tough that he didn't like when I told him I loved him. It kind of bothered him and it made me feel bad. And same thing with my mom. I would tell her I love her and she would say it back, but she was always so drunk and, I just never really felt it. So I got used to my whole life not really telling people that I loved them, not really saying, hey, I love you. And also not expecting people to say that back to me. So I had a complete loss of love language. I had no love language, which, kind of added to my bullying and treating people rudely and coldly. And I was mean to my sister and I kind of became a bully myself. I kind of repeated that cycle. In my older, not really older, but young 20s, so about 22, I had a friend who had a marijuana plant, and the marijuana plant was, real small. It hadn't sprouted very far, but it was starting to die. So, he had a handful of marijuana plants. He gave me the plant and asked me if I wanted to try to revitalize it. And so I did. I started giving it water. I started putting it into the sun, and I started getting a really strange euphoria when I saw this plant starting to survive. It was kind of like, slowly coming back to life, starting to get stronger in the stalk, starting to get tall. And I started to develop kind of a relationship with this plant. I started to talk to it, tell it my problems, as strange as I felt, as weird as it made me feel. I started telling this plant all my dark secrets. There was even a time when I started, kind of singing to the plant. And I'm not the greatest singer, but I heard that singing helps plants grow. So I started singing to the plant. I even started rapping to the plant, and I just developed this huge relationship with a plant. And I think the reason why is because I was so desperate for it. I lacked so much of that connection and relationship that I was willing to give it to a plant. But the plant was giving it back to me in ways, right? Because I had to water it. I had to make sure it got light. I had to take care of it. And in that time of my life, I was so reckless. I was partying a lot. I was womanizing. I was experimenting again with drugs and stuff that, I needed something to ground me. And that plant was like, you need to be here. You need to be taking care of me. So that was the case, right? We got really close. And sure enough, I had a roommate at the time. He was kind of a shady character, a good guy, but kind of, just kind of shady. One day I left. I was gone for a few hours, came home, and the plant was gone. The plant was completely, somebody had gotten a saw and had literally cut it from the stalk and removed the whole plant. When I got home, there was nothing but the pot itself and some leaves on the ground and maybe a few buds that got knocked off. But I was so devastated. Even I surprised myself by being so devastated by the loss of this plant. I started calling everybody and I started accusing people that I know for a fact didn't take it, but I was that desperate and that heartbreak broken to kind of lose a good friend. I mean, as silly as that sounds, the plant was my friend and I lost it. So, but what I did learn from that experience was that there was a hole in my heart and I needed something to fill that void. So, a few months down the line, I had another friend, and he was a pit bull owner. he had 3 or 4 pit bulls. One of them was named Mia, and she was a really young pit bull, maybe about 6 months at the time. Beautiful pit bull. And he would come over with his dogs. We'd hang out and smoke weed and just kind of chill, drink a beer or whatever. And the dogs would be kind of hanging out. And I noticed that Mia always came and hung out with me. For whatever reason, Mia would come sit next to me and let me pet her. And I felt kind of the same, connection that I did with the plant. It was at first kind of like, a little bit more small in its amount, but there was definitely a connection happening. So I told him, hey, you've got a lot of dogs. If it ever comes to a point where you can't keep Mia, let me know and I would like to have her. He got really offended right off the bat. He was like, you can't have my dog, right? And so, I let him calm down and I told him, I'm not trying to take your dog, but if it comes around to you needing it, let me know. And so a few weeks later, he showed back up. He had a dog bowl with him. He had dog food with him, and he had a leash. So that basically told me that he was ready to give me the dog. And I took the dog. And I had a lot of hope for that relationship because I was excited, right? I had another friend, and this one was even more, was more able to be there for me than even a plant, right? Because it's a dog, and that's a little bit more involved in the relationship than the plant. So I was excited. But one thing that was really complicated was I didn't know at first the dog had been abused. So I was basically rescuing this dog in a way because it was getting abused by Joe, my friend. That's his name, Joe. He was hitting her. He was kicking her. He was definitely being really violent to her. And the reason why I knew it for a fact is because she peed in my house the second day I had her. I got really mad at her. I stuck her head in the piss, and I yelled at her, and she turned around and growled at me. Showed me her teeth. She basically made me feel like she was gonna bite me, and that scared me. On the one hand, I didn't want to get bitten. On the other hand, I also started to feel like, well, maybe this isn't what I should be doing. Maybe I can't rescue this dog. Maybe I'm just not I'm not cut out for it. So, but I decided, I'm going to give it my honest try. And I changed. Right then and there, I kind of realized that I needed to change the way I behaved. Right. I wasn't going to be able to work with this dog out of anger or out of frustration. I wasn't going to scare this dog into doing what I wanted. I was going to have to find a more symbiotic way to exist with this animal. And I worked on it. I started having less of an anger problem, at least with the dog. I worked on my anger. I made sure that I was home. I started, making sure I had a schedule for letting the dog out. Obviously providing food and water was essential. And if you thought I had to be at home for a plant, I definitely had to be home for the dog, right? Like on a whole nother level. So I stopped going out so much. I stopped drinking so much. I stopped partying so much. I was less concerned with women, and I was more concerned with just me and my dog. And we got really close. We got super united to the point that I, kind of saw her as almost my baby, my daughter, right? I mean, I felt like I was rescuing this dog, and this dog in a way was rescuing me. I was becoming a different person, and it was a better version of what I was. So, I kept going along with it. I was, really excited for the way things were turning out. And right when I felt like here I had my best friend, my best companion, she ran away. So I, had some company over. They left the door open. The dog ran out of the door and took off. And this happened, I'd say, at about 9 o'clock in the day, in the morning. So, I did what anyone would do. I grabbed the leash and I started looking for her. I looked all over the UNM area, all over different parts of Albuquerque where we hung out, dog parks and, places like where I just took her to go on walks. And there was no sign of Mia. I lost her, and I was pretty sure I lost her for good. So I was heartbroken, and I came home. I was really depressed. I wanted to go to sleep. This was probably about maybe 4 or 5 in the afternoon after spending the whole day looking. I gave up. I was just like, dang, right when I was about to love something, it left me, And I had a handful of relationships with women before that, couple years, maybe here and there, couple months in other cases, and in some cases, a couple days. Like, I wasn't really relationship material before all this. But this dog really, really, really changed me, and I was really upset that I lost her. I felt like I lost any opportunity I had to develop love. And sure enough, We came to about, maybe 5, 6 that night. It was starting to get dark outside, I remember, kind of like maybe about August. And I heard some scratching at the door. And, being that it had been, I don't know, 8 hours or so since I seen the dog, I had, skepticism. I was pretty like, there's no way that noise is Mia. There's no way. But, I had to try because I was that desperate. And I was hoping for, some real luck. And I went and opened the door, and sure enough, Mia was right there. She was sitting right there with her tongue hanging out, panting, just like the biggest brat on the planet, right? But I was so happy. I was so excited to see her. I got down on my knees and hugged her tight, and it was like I celebrated. I couldn't believe the miracle that was put in front of me of this dog showing back up. It was the most amazing feeling. And as I was really excited, I was telling, oh my God, Mia, you're back. Thank you for coming back. I love you. I love you. I said it multiple times. And after I said that, I was very surprised because I had to listen to what I just said. I had to kind of recollect and think about what I just said because I hadn't said those 3 words in so long. But sure enough, I was telling this dog, I love you, and the dog, licked me in the face, which was, Mia's way of saying she loved me back. She couldn't use words. But at that moment, literally that night, I told myself, you know what? I think I'm ready. I think I'm ready to understand and feel love. I'm ready to give love, and I'm ready to receive love. And not just human love. I'm sorry, not just dog love or plant love, but human love, right? I decided that maybe I was ready for a real relationship with a woman. And so, 6 months to a year later, I ended up meeting my girlfriend, Claire. We've been together for 9 years. That's all in the book. And then at the end of the book, Mia dies. So Mia did pass away. She passed away about 2 years ago. We got another dog in the meantime. His name is Raider, and he's awesome as well. But, if it wasn't for Mia, I would have never had an opportunity, I don't think, to share in real love. And it's amazing to me how this dog rescued me. This dog taught me what love is, right? We think that part of being human is love, and part of the human experience is being loved. And I wasn't really feeling that part of the human experience until a dog showed up in my life. So this dog, I would argue this dog taught me in a lot of ways how to be more human, which is something I think dogs tend to do. So, yeah.
Very true. Very true. That is a beautiful experience. I'm just kind of bowled away by how the universe, that's the way I like to put it. The universe. Some people use God, some people use other terms, but I like to use the universe. So, for me, I feel it's beautiful because the universe saw you, and like it always does, it knew what you needed before you knew what you needed, right? Saw an angry young man missing his leg, who's gone through this. Parents are kind of a little bit out to lunch at the time, not whatever, not ready, to be who they would eventually become. But so it says, okay, we got to ease him into this love thing. Okay, because he's got machismo in the culture he's dealing with. It's been drilled into his head since he was a young man that you don't cry, men don't look weak, you got to be strong. And he's already feeling less of because of the leg missing and all of that, right? Mm-hmm. So we got to break him in easy. So let's start him off with a plant, right? Mm-hmm. So the plant works. Then when you didn't need the plant anymore, the plant mysteriously disappears, right? But in a way that strikes you with a chord that helps you to learn even more of the lesson of the plant, right? Which you had already learned quite a bit. And then the dog comes into your life. The universe says, okay, we got the plant, great. Level 2, a dog, right? Which is another being, another living being. Right. And so now, like the plant, you have to come out of yourself and stop being so selfish about yourself. Right. And only think of yourself and think about this other being, because now it's like you have a child now. Right. Another life is depending on you to not screw it up. Right. So you learn that and you did that, and then got you to the point where you had that realization, and then you were ready for the next level, which was human love. And there it was, and then the universe provided you with a wonderful companion, in that regard. So I think that's just a beautiful, beautiful story. I think it's beautiful that you put that in the book. I highly encourage people to get out there and read it. We're coming in the home stretch. I want to close off with you reading something, but in the meantime, a couple quick things. What advice would you have for writers out there, if any? And what's next for Mario Montoya?
Cool. Okay, so as far as advice for writers, I think the important thing is just to write and to write every day. It's easy to get into a habit of not writing, even though you are a writer. So if you can find an hour or 2 hours, or even more if you're lucky enough, you got to be writing, and you got to be writing constantly. So that I would also say reading. You can't be a very good writer without being a good reader. Just like when you create music, right? You get your ideas from other music and other sounds and other bands, genres, whatnot. Same thing with writing. If you need to expand, if you're stuck, if you're in a place where you don't know how to structure something, grab a book and start getting some ideas. I mean, I feel like readers from the past, writers from the past are current teachers. They're our teachers now. So they're teaching us through their books on how to write. And another thing I definitely like to tell writers is don't be so concerned with sitting in front of your computer and writing, because the actual act of writing is less important than the thinking. So, that sounds a little confusing, and I'll explain it a little bit. Obviously, while you're sitting at your computer and you're actually writing words, actually writing sentences and paragraphs and using commas and periods, well, yeah, sure, you're writing. You're in the act of writing. But your best thoughts often come when you're not even by your computer. And in those moments, you need to be a writer. You got to find a way to record those thoughts, write them down, put them in a tape recorder, because your coolest ideas, they seem to happen when you're not in front of your computer. Take notes if you can. I mean, find a system so that way when you're coming up with really awesome thoughts, you can get them down and then expand on them later. So there's that. As far as what's coming up for me, I'm really excited to get this book done. Numb, right? The boy who couldn't fail. I'm close to getting it done. I'm in my second draft, which it's looking good. I'm figuring by maybe my third draft, I might have a completed book. And I'm looking forward to like readings. I got a few readings lined up. I'll be working with Jimmy on my book, and I'll be working with Jimmy on a couple of other side projects. So I'm in the midst of doing that as well. I really just see myself doing the writing, trying to get the book out. I do music as well. So, shortly here, you might hear me performing here in Albuquerque locally. I'll do some rap music, and I'll put all that on my website. So if you're looking to see where I'm reading or where I'm performing music, please check my website out. There'll be a link provided. And yeah.
Absolutely. There will be a link provided in the description area down on YouTube, and absolutely check that out. Mario, it's been an absolute pleasure. We're going to close out here with a little something else from you, and but I just want to say how much of a pleasure it's been having you here on Behind the Screens, cool conversations with cool people. You definitely fit the bill when it comes to cool people doing cool things that the whole world should know about and be inspired by. You're a great inspiration. There are many people out there, I know, many people who are dealing with a lot of what you're dealing with missing limbs, with various conditions, etc. People treating them, in ways that are not necessarily appropriate. But you're out here, helping people find the language and helping people to understand what's going on and giving it directly from your experience. And that means a lot. So I want to thank you for that. And thank you for being with us here on Behind the Screens. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Garland, for the opportunity, for me just being able to tell my story. And I also want to thank Kimberly for helping behind the scenes. And I also want to thank Jimmy for providing the opportunity. So, thank you very much. I'm very gracious and very honored.
All right. Let's hear a little final something from you.
Okay. I'm going to read chapter 16. Of course, not the entire chapter, but I'm going to read a portion of chapter 16. In my book, the chapter is called Mi Amor. And even though it's about my dog, Mia's not going to come up in this section of the chapter. She actually comes up earlier. So this is about me and my struggles with a wheelchair. As you know, I've had struggles with, economic struggles, you could say, poverty, right? So I didn't always have access to functioning wheelchairs, and this is just a little kind of story about that. So here we go. My homeboy Armando dropped by with a blunt, even though he was on probation. But that crazy motherfucker didn't care. To him, life was a Hollywood action thriller where he was Rambo and Scarface all rolled into one. The dude loved to laugh and he loved to give me shit. Man, he was a real blast to be around. But he could get a person in a real trouble real fast. We were playing oldies via YouTube. I found it amusing how pintos and cholos listen to love songs. Then they tell stories about committing crimes and street fights, usually over money or false pride. It was a thing, romantic thugs who jammed the Temptations, or Al Green who sing the Isley Brothers, or Boys to Men in the shower, right after pulling a gun on someone. It seemed like a contradiction, or was it proof that there really was a thin line between love and hate, like in the oldie song? Man, your wheelchair looks like piss, Armando noticed. It's falling apart, bro. How do we get you a new one? Man, they're expensive, I said. Why? You want to buy me one, homie? Yeah, right. The ganja business ain't that booming, he said. He fell in a silent contemplation. I appreciated the gesture. This jailbird had a heart. He might not have been the kind of guy you introduced to your sweet abuelita, but when the shit got real, you wanted someone like him around. And he would be in a heartbeat because that's how Armando was. I got a plan, he said, and the thought of what that might be scared the shit out of me. A plan? What plan? Let's just go, he said, knowing I'd try to change his mind. Man, I'll tell you about it in the car. Minutes later, we pulled up to the university hospital parking lot in the patient drop-off area. Armando turned off his lights and popped off the emergencies of his white Ford Escort, and he popped the trunk. He retrieved my dilapidated wheelchair. Okay, you remember the plan? I nodded, but I wasn't sure. I was shaking in my shortes. My knees were knocking. But we were here, and I was going through with it. We had a plan. It wasn't surefire, and the plan had holes. We never even thought of a plan B or C. But we did discuss a loose procedure, which was better than winging it. We entered through the emergency room sliding doors. The lobby was packed with sick people. Armando approached the counter, bombarding the receptionist with a million random questions. I scoped for spare wheelchairs. There was only 2 left in the lobby. One had an oxygen tank connected to it. That was too conspicuous, I thought. The other had OBGYN stenciled on the back. Out of the 2, I chose that one and I parked next to it, transferring quick so that no one noticed. Seconds later, Armando reappeared behind me, gripping the handlebars. Okay, he said, let's get out of here. We headed for the automatic doors. There is a Spanish term we use in times like these, resquache, or to make do. It means, despite all odds, a person has the will to survive, a resourcefulness, and a defiant stubbornness in the face of failure. To make the most from the least, something out of nada, second life from discarded fragments and junk. That was resquache. Rebuilding wheelchairs, that was resquache. Even taking one from the hospital, that was resquache too. Some called it trash, but we called it repurposed treasure. We hold it together with scotch tape and yarn and super glue. Not because it's easy or because it's fair, but because it's not. We do what we have to do. It's not like they'll miss it, Armando reasoned in the car. These hospitals, they're fine, man. They'll be fine. They'll be okay. They're rich. Still, I appreciate you, Armando. I know you don't need another charge, homie. Nah, anything for a brother, he said. It's fucked up you can't get a brand new one. But nothing can stop the will of a person, he said. I learned that in a jail cell, bro. Oh yeah? Did you learn what OBGYN means in a jail cell? Armando thought for a second. No, I think it has something to do with pregnant women. We glanced at each other, trying to contain our laughter, but we couldn't help it. We had to laugh. Thank you.
Mario Montoya is a teacher, a writer, an MC, the 2021 recipient of the Rudolfo Anaya Fellowship honoring promising New Mexican authors. He's a proud Burqueño. He has received his MFA in creative writing from the University of New Mexico this past May 2021. His work has appeared in books, anthologies, and journals. Mario Montoya, thank you so much for being with us here on Behind the Screen. Cool conversations with cool people.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Well, that does it, people of the interwebs. That is it for our interview today with Mario Montoya, up-and-coming author, poet, writer, novelist, performer, hip-hop MC, all-around cool guy. I want to thank you for tuning in to us here at Behind the Screen, cool conversations with cool people. Once again, my name is Garland Thompson. I'm your host and the founder of Zoomcatchers, which this series is powered by. And I'd like to also take a moment to say thank you to our whole Zoomcatchers team. We could not do this without them. My God, I couldn't do any of this without them, so it is just a gas to have them. They're one of the best teams one could ever want. I'm talking, of course, of our good friend Shayla Zamora, our good friend Miss Natalie Jamavan. We've also got Lily Forrester, Julie Kim, Catherine Cross, and of course our dear friend and executive director Kimberly Gunn. So I want to say thank you to all of them for being a part of Zoomcatchers and for being a part of this show, Behind the Screen, cool conversations with cool people. I have so much fun. We'll be back very soon with our next guest, Jimmy Santiago Baca. So ladies and gentlemen, until then, stay safe. Keep wearing those masks. Stay socially distanced. Remember, the Delta variant is out there. We're into Delta Plus. Might be into Delta Plus soon. So whatever you do, take care. Be careful out there. Take care of yourselves. Love each other. And remember, without you, this world would be a lot worse off. So we'll see you next time, folks. Bye-bye.